These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Saunders Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once Saunders Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Mer Street house became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intra-family relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add, does not involve human trafficking. This case all started with diligent Dollar General clerks calling authorities with concerns over children they observed. We ask the public to be mindful of the circumstances around them, especially involving children. We continue to ask for the public's respect for the rights and privacy of the child victims in this case.
Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Mer Street in Hamden. These indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation. However, to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here.
16 kids locked in a 12 by 12 room.
It turns out there are actually 3 parallel investigations happening. Investigators started out investigating allegations of child abuse in December of last year. That led to charges against 2 men. And this is interesting. These men are names that we haven't really been focused on before. But the 2 men who were charged are Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson. And then while investigating them, investigators began looking into Elizabeth and Gary Saunders. That's according to NBC4, and they say that Gary Saunders Jr. and Elizabeth Saunders have now both been indicted on 2 counts of sexual battery and 2 counts of unlawful conduct with a minor. We don't know who the victims of the sexual abuse are, which is pretty typical. Like it's, that kind of stuff remains secret, especially since they are minors, it seems. But officials said the victims were not the couple's children. According to NBC4, records show that Henderson, remember he's one of the new names, Brandon Henderson, one of the new guys who was arrested, that he is part of the larger Saunders family. Exactly what that means, I'm not sure. It's confusing. Authorities are being very, very tight-lipped. They're just giving out really the basics of this information. Which I'm going to have, again, Kim Dagonia on in a second to help us kind of piece some of this together.
Living in filth, described as almost feral. And you already know, just like I know, that we were never supposed to find out why police really showed up at that house on Mer Street. But now we do. And the truth is worse than the conditions those children were found in. The official story from the beginning was that authorities were executing a search warrant. That part was true. What they didn't tell you is what kind of warrant, what kind of investigation, and what name was written on that paperwork. Gary Saunders Jr. That's who they were looking for. Not for the kids, not for the squalor. They came for his DNA.
So I was thinking about the Turpin case and some of the other cases that you've prosecuted and that you work on now with your firm. Do you think this is just the beginning? Like, could there be other charges, other sexual assault claims that they're looking into involving other victims?
Oh, 100%. Not just other victims, but honestly, Brian, I wouldn't be surprised if we in the future see other charges added to the complaint for their very own kids with this type of behavior. Once you see, sadly, one count that somebody's a child predator, you often see other victims having the courage to come forward. And we also see routinely, disclosure of sexual assault is a process. It takes some survivors decades and decades to come forward. So these kids are just now being rescued from the conditions in which they were living in, having issues of not being able to be fed, things like that. And so the sexual assault disclosures, if it happened to them, is going to come much later, if ever, as well as any other potential victims. So I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of what really was happening in that house, to be honest with you.
And look, I need you to stay with me here because this is where the whole case turns inside out. The Ohio Attorney General finally admitted it. This started as a child sex abuse investigation. Family child sex abuse, that's the phrase they used, and it led back to December of last year. 2 men were charged first. Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson.
Something is going on. That's strange. And it's clear that law enforcement is wanting to not let the public know what's really happening. And what I found most interesting about this new information is, the first investigation began into this Joshua Saunders and Brandon Henderson, these two individuals, for rape, for sexual, deviance behavior. From that investigation came a search warrant trying to obtain Gary Sider's DNA. Why I find that interesting, and then we know from that search warrant comes the discovery of all the kids who were living in these deplorable conditions. But
Right.
going back to the fact that law enforcement is actually procuring a search warrant and serving it for Gary Sider's DNA, that tells me that they expect that there is fresh evidence that will link Gary's DNA to a victim. So while all the tabloids, the information says it's from a 2022 investigation, there's only one of two ways why his DNA, in my opinion, as a sexual assault former prosecutor, would be relevant 4 years later in 2026. And that would be number one, because we have some type of bodily fluid, semen, something from a victim that we need to determine, does Gary Sider's DNA match? Or there's a victim who has, sadly, I've seen obtain like a sexually transmitted disease, and they need to test Gary's DNA to see if he's positive for it, to see if the link is there that he gave it to her from sexually abusing. But there's definitely interesting things going on behind the scenes with all of these new details coming out.
So you mentioned it. It was Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson who were arrested and charged with child sexual abuse. And
Rape,
apparently,
essentially.
Brandon is somehow related to the Siders, like distantly, I've heard. But what would then cause them, do you think, to have to go get DNA from Gary Siders? I guess that's the part, and that's again why they blew open the whole lid about the kids living like that. But what would have caused them to go get his DNA based on those other two being investigated, do you think?
I mean, clearly they thought he was a suspect in some form, whether it was as a child predator, whether it was as an aider and abetter, whether it's as, a child sex ring, we don't know. But the fact that they're trying to obtain his DNA is very specific, and the DNA looks for very specific things, especially in sexual assault cases. We're looking for a match after we've done a rape kit, essentially. And so to me, that's what it tells us, that they went to look for his DNA, that he's somehow connected potentially to the rapes of Josh and Brandon, because that's how they're linked.
Which is so interesting because we didn't know until now why they went to the house. I mean, there were all sorts of theories, but now we know.
Right. And it was nothing related, right, as of yet that we're aware of, to the deplorable conditions of the kids.
Those names mean nothing to most people watching this, but they mean everything to what was really happening behind those walls. And here's the thing, though. Brandon Henderson is part of the larger Saunders family. Exactly how, they won't say. They're being very tight-lipped. And when officials get quiet like that, you know what that means. They're protecting something, or someone, so investigators start digging into Saunders and Henderson. And that trail somehow leads them to Gary Siders Jr. They needed his DNA. Think about that for a second. They didn't want to search the house. They wanted a swab from inside his mouth. That's what the warrant was for, to secure his DNA for genetic testing. And while they were there serving that warrant, they found the children, 16 of them, ranging from 18 months to 18 years old. Twins. 4-year-old twins. 2-year-old twins. 1.5-year-old twins. Kids who couldn't spell their own names. This wasn't a welfare check. Not even close. This was a sex crimes unit looking for evidence in a rape investigation, and they walked into a house of horrors they never expected. Now here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part nobody taught came down. Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, 2 counts of sexual battery each. 2 counts of unlawful conduct with a minor each. Read that again. Elizabeth too, the mother, the same woman whose lawyers have been painting her as a victim, the same woman who's been fighting in court to get bond, to see her children, to tell everyone she loves them. She's now charged with sexual battery. And I'm going to say what a lot of people are thinking, but won't say out loud. She wasn't just complicit in the neglect. She's accused of being part of the abuse itself.
And you and I have talked about this before. I mean, her lawyer has sort of painted her out as a victim too in all of this. And you mentioned her mental health has come up. She's been trying to get a bond. Is it possible that she is also a victim, or do you think now that we see that she's been charged with this now also, it shows us even more that she's not a victim at all?
It's hard to say. There are some facts that point to the fact that Elizabeth could potentially be a victim herself in some capacity. It's interesting to me that there's reports that she married Gary Jr. when she was 15 years old and he was 18. Ironically, that was the exact same fact pattern we saw in the Turpin case. Louise was around the age of 15 and she married David when he was 18. There's a reason why 15-year-olds don't have the right to get married and bear children. They need their parents' consent or signature because they're not emotionally developed and ready to be married and start having children. And so could we see some mental health or some victimization from that alone? Absolutely. In California, if a 15-year-old is having sex with an 18-year-old, that's statutory rape. That right there is a crime in and of itself. And so we see that pattern oddly in the Turpin case as well as in this case. And then it begs the question, if she's getting married at the age of 15 to an 18-year-old, is there some type of mind control and emotional control going on with Gary over her? And that just kind of progresses over the years that leads us to where we are now. Sure, I think that's possible.
Kim Dionia, the prosecutor from the Turpin case, she said something that stopped me cold. She said in her experience, sometimes the mother holds the child down. Sometimes the mother lets it happen for money. Sometimes the mother participates. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but the charges tell a story, and the story is that Elizabeth Siders was not just a bystander in that house. But here's what's eating at me, and I need to slow down for a minute and talk to you directly. Because this next part, it gets personal. The victims in this sex abuse case, the ones that started this whole investigation. Officials said they were not the couple's children, not their own kids. So who were they? Extended family. Children from the community, kids who were brought into that house. We don't know. They won't tell us. The court records are sealed. The Attorney General ended his statement by saying he would conclude there to preserve the integrity of the investigation. And honestly, I understand why they seal things. I do. But when you see a case this massive, this disturbing, and the people in charge give you 30 seconds of pre-recorded statements, you start to wonder what else they don't want you to see. Because here's the thing. This didn't start with police work. It started with Dollar General clerks. That's right. The Attorney General admitted it. Diligent Dollar General clerks called authorities with concerns about children they observed. Not social workers. Not school officials. Not the system that's supposed to protect these kids. The minimum wage retail workers who saw something and actually did something. God bless those clerks, because nobody else was paying attention. And now we find out there are 3 parallel investigations happening. 3. The original case against Saunders and Henderson, the case against Gary and Elizabeth Siders, and the massive investigation into the conditions those 16 kids were living in. But they all connect. They all circle back to that house on Mer Street. And the reason for that, well, you'll see. Here's what the former prosecutor said that really got me. She said that when investigators go after someone's DNA 4 years after an alleged incident, it means one of 2 things. Either they have bodily fluid evidence from a victim they need to match, or there's a victim with a sexually transmitted disease, and they need to see if Gary Siders gave it to them. That's not speculation. That's how these investigations work. That's the reality of what led them to that door. And I've been covering true crime long enough to know that when a case starts to unravel like this, the first charges are never the last.
Why do you think Elizabeth Siders would have also been indicted on 2 counts of sexual battery? I mean, what do you think that could mean?
I mean, I have seen this in my career, and it's horrible that she was working alongside him. I've seen a couple cases in my career where the husband and the wife worked together to sexually assault the children. Oftentimes I've seen the mother help hold down the child while the father could perform the sexual assault. I've seen the mother kind of acquiesce and let her children be abused for money from other men, let them take photos. It's not uncommon to see the mom who's in a relationship with a man like this participating passively for many different reasons, right? We see her mental health issues that they're claiming, but it's not uncommon, sadly. I have seen this before in my career.
Kim said it herself. She'd be surprised if we don't eventually see charges involving their own children. The ones who were rescued. The ones who can't speak yet. The ones whose brains developed like Swiss cheese with holes in them, as one expert described it. Those kids may never be able to tell us what happened to them.
Is it normal for so much information to remain sealed? I guess because it is a sexual assault case?
Yes, and because, a lot of them are minors, that's very normal. And it's high profile, so they want to preserve what investigation they are likely still conducting.
Legally, what will that mean? Will that impact how she's treated or?
It's not going to impact a lot. If anything, it would come into play as a mitigating circumstance, potentially, if she's convicted and the judge goes to sentence her. They could put on evidence that, because her mental health and her victimization began at age 15, that somehow that's mitigated and she shouldn't receive a life sentence and have a determinate term, something to that effect. What we're most likely going to see is that it plays into her defense, that she didn't have the requisite intent. She couldn't develop the intent to do these things to the children, to sexually abuse them, to endanger their well-being, because her mental health could not formulate the intent. And I think that's the likely scenario we're going to see in the next year or two as this case pans out.
How do you think this will turn out, especially with her trying to say she's a victim? I mean, and just overall, do you think there'll be with the Turpin case, there was a plea deal. What do you think will happen next year?
Yeah, the Turpin case, there was a plea deal, and that mental health diversion defense that Louise tried was not successful at all. It was shut down almost as quickly as they raised it. It did not play a part at all in the sentencing. Do I think it's going to be successful? Not likely. And this is why. Because Elizabeth has been living in these conditions with these children and allowing them to be treated this way for so many years. It's really hard for any jury or any prosecutor or any judge or any mental health professional, I would think, to opine that this is an ongoing victimization and that at some point she wasn't able to get out from underneath this situation. At some point, she became an aider and abetter, a co-conspirator right along with Gary. So to me, the longer that she stays in that situation, I just don't know that anyone is going to believe that at some point she couldn't have gotten out. We're not seeing any signs of her having psychosis or, hearing voices, hallucinations, things that would suggest that her mental health was so compromised for so long that would warrant her keeping these children in this situation for 18 years. And so I don't foresee it being successful.
But the evidence might, and that brings me to the part that makes me physically sick. Jalissa Turpin. You remember her. Survivor of the original House of Horrors in California. I interviewed her this month, and she talked about what it felt like to be one of those kids. She said she didn't know that friends were real. She thought neighbors talking to each other was something from movies. She didn't know school was normal. She said being asked, "How are you?" felt strange because nobody in that house ever asked her if she was okay. Not once.
In Ohio, the mom through the courts is fighting to try to see her children.
Yeah.
She wants to see them.
Yeah.
Says she loves them.
Sorry. I okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay. But what do you think of that?
I think that is really dumb. And I do not think, I've seen people saying, oh, she's the victim or whatever. Okay, if she can be a victim, but that does not give her any slack whatsoever. I believe my mom was a victim, but that does not give her any, any excuse to do what she did to her kids, And I think that obviously they're gonna want to say, this happens a lot. When a parent does something that's very bad and they get caught for doing something very bad to their children, they say, oh, I want to see my child, I want to see them or whatever, it could just be because they want control. It could be because they want to like intimidate the child and be like, oh, you can't escape me, or I'm still here, or anything like that. Or it could be just to help their case to make them look innocent, because I'm pretty sure the parents pleaded, like said that they weren't guilty. And right, so it like would, I guess, look, they might think it look better for their case if they're saying, I want to see my children, like I care about them. But that's not, I do not believe in any way whatsoever that that is true, or that is what the kids need. And I think that if that was to happen, that would just do more harm to the kids. I don't think that the parents have any right to say, oh, I care about my child and I miss them and I want to see them, when you were putting them through abuse and torture for so many years. Yeah.
Would that have really set you back?
Yeah. Oh, I would go to court sometimes and I would see just like the back of her head, or even just talking about like the stuff like with my parents, and I would get physically sick where I would throw up because of the anxiety from it. And it really was like hard to heal when I was like, okay, let's start healing, but then I'm gonna see her in like a week, you know, or I'm gonna be in court talking about her in a week. It was even that was hard. So seeing her, meeting with her like face to face, that would have been like so bad. And like I said, I'm not these kids. I don't know. I didn't experience the same thing. They might have a different experience, but and I don't know. It might be a possible chance that the mom was like her life was being threatened and she was stuck in the house too, or anything like that. There are many possibilities, but just because a parent is saying, I want to see my kid and I miss them and I love them, nobody should be saying, immediately dropping everything and going, oh, she must be innocent, you know, or, oh, these kids should see their parent, you know?
Then she said something that stopped me. She said when the mom in Ohio says she wants to see her children, says she loves them, that doesn't mean anything, because abusive parents always say that when they get caught, it's about control. It's about intimidation. It's about making themselves look innocent for the cameras. And Jalissa said seeing the back of her own mother's head in court was enough to make her throw up from anxiety. That's what these kids would face if that woman gets her way. But here's the part that should make you angry. Jalissa wasn't just abused by her parents. She was re-abused in foster care, put into a home with foster parents who ended up charged with child abuse. And now these 16 Ohio kids, these who can't speak, who can't spell their names, who don't know what a friend is, they're being handed over to the same broken system. And we're all just supposed to trust that it'll work out this time. Are you kidding me? The Ohio mom is fighting in court right now, fighting to see those kids. And her defense is that she married Gary when she was 15 and he was 18.
With the kids who were rescued from the house, and again, just with your experience with the Turpins, and some of these kids apparently couldn't even speak. Do you think we're at a point now where they're able to give prosecutors information, or is that going to take more time?
Oh no, I think it's going to take so much more time. And you know, we had one of the experts explain to us very eloquently when we were interviewing and trying to understand the depths of the damage to the Turpin kids and how their brain developed or did not develop because of the conditions. And one of the experts explained to me that if you take a piece of Swiss cheese, there's holes all throughout it. And then if you take a piece of cheddar cheese, there's no holes. A normal child's brain is supposed to develop like that cheddar cheese, no holes in it. But the kids who are not receiving the communication, the normal societal things that they're supposed to be experiencing, are missing out on very significant markers in their age and their brain development, which is creating these holes like the Swiss cheese. And those holes likely will not be filled in. So while we hope that there's some type of therapy and socializing and, you know, types of things we can do with these kids to fill in the holes, there's a good chance there's going to be permanent damage that they may not be able to disclose. The hope is that they will get good treatment and will be able to, but I don't know.
That she's a victim too. Mental health issues, mind control. And look, I can acknowledge that a 15-year-old marrying an 18-year-old is wrong. It is. But at some point, Victimhood ends and accountability begins. At some point, you become a co-conspirator.
And I want to play for you a little more of my interview with Jalissa Turpin, who was one of the survivors, one of the Turpin kids. I did an episode with her earlier this month, but there was more of the interview that I hadn't shared yet that I want to share in this episode, just because I think she is an inspiration because she survived and overcame so much. And when we talk about this Ohio case and we learn now more about what these kids may have gone through, I think it's important to hear from Jalissa because she has the perspective of going through that and how to overcome that. So here's more of my interview with Jalissa. When you first came out into the real world, how do you, I mean, when you haven't really had any socialization skills, and I'm thinking of the Ohio kids, like how do you even begin to learn?
I honestly don't really know. It's kind of like, it's a little bit blurry, like my memory from things then, but I don't know, it was kind of hard to like adjust to the world, I feel like, or like socialize and stuff, but
Did you know that you could have a friend?
Like while I was in the house?
Yeah.
No. No. I don't know. I thought that people like having friends and like neighbors talking to each other and all that stuff, I thought that was like fake or just like stuff that's in the movies or something. I didn't know that like I could actually have a friend. I also didn't know that like school was even normal. I didn't know like where I would get a friend.
So you have to start really from nothing in terms of learning about all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that people, it's easy to forget about that for most people because we've been born into, or most people have been born into a world where they know everything. Like having friends, like nobody thinks, oh, this person's not gonna know that friends are a thing. And like even with literally saying, how are you? That was odd to me that people would say, hi, how are you? It's like, why is everybody asking how I am? Like it was so weird because it's the most common phrase ever, but it was never used. I like don't remember a single time in that house I was ever asked like by like an adult or a parent, like, are you okay? Or how are you? Like it was just odd to me. And I thought it was just because it was my case that people were like, I guess, concerned. But and I heard people talking to like saying it to each other. So it was a little bit confusing, but yeah, I feel like it's easy for people to forget like common things like that. Like it literally is like so hard to adjust. And like for these kids in Ohio, them coming out into this world when they've been isolated their whole life it's gonna be hard. Like as much as I wish I could be like, it won't be that hard, it'll be easy, that's not the case. It's gonna be really hard to adjust, but it's definitely possible. And it's definitely possible for them to get the healing and everything that they need. And I think that's why it's so important that we make sure their surroundings, the people around them, the workers, and like the schooling that you place them in, like don't put it in a school that's like known for being bad or something. You know, like the foster care system, like the workers you place them with, the house foster homes that you place them with, it is so important because right now, this is basically their first, like, I don't know, because I'm not them, but for me, it literally felt like my first day on earth. And so whatever I accept, whatever I got, that was normal to me. Like for me, when I got out, it was a little bit intimidating, but I was so happy. Like I was always on cloud 9 because it was like, honestly, just being able to see a tree, just being able to breathe in fresh air, that literally felt like heaven to me. And yeah, like no, I felt like it can't really get more scary or worse than being in that house, but it still is intimidating being in the world and trying to adjust to everything.
Kim said it plainly. The longer Elizabeth stayed in that situation, the harder it is to believe she couldn't have gotten out. She's not showing signs of psychosis. No hallucinations. No voices telling her to keep her kids in a 12 by 12 room. She's just claiming mental health issues because that's what defense attorneys do when they have nothing else. And here's what I keep coming back to. Those 16 kids, the ones who were isolated from the world, the ones whose brains may never fully recover. They didn't ask for any of this. And now their fate is in the hands of the same system that ignored them for years. The same system that only found them by accident while looking for someone's DNA in a sex abuse case. So let me ask you something. And I want you to honestly in the comments, if you saw something wrong in your neighborhood, would you speak up? Or would you stay quiet like the neighbors who said they suspected something but never called? Because those Dollar General clerks, they're the only reason those kids are alive today. Not the police, not child services, not the school system. A couple of retail workers who paid attention. And that should terrify every single person watching this. We're going to stay on this case. Because I promise you this is just the tip of the iceberg. The sex abuse charges are going to expand. More names are going to come out. And the question we should all be asking isn't what happened in that house. It's why did it take a DNA warrant to find 16 forgotten children? Tell me what you think about Elizabeth Siders claiming she's a victim. Does she deserve bond? Does she deserve to see those kids? Or is she exactly where she belongs? I want to know what you think. Because I think we all already know the truth.